For most of your life, $1 million has meant one thing. You've made it. The seven-figure finish line. The number that means you never have to worry about money again. There is just one problem. In 2026, it's a lie. Here's the truth almost nobody wants to say out loud. $1 million today produces a retirement income of about $40,000 a year. Not $40,000 a month. $40,000 a year. That's it. That is below what the average American household earns right now while they're still working. And it gets worse. Because that million isn't just smaller than you think. It's shrinking every single year you hold it. So today, we're going to do the uncomfortable math on the most famous number in all of personal finance and figure out what it actually takes to retire in 2026. Because the old finish line moved. And most people have absolutely no idea. My name is Jenna, and I spend way too much time obsessing over the financial milestones we chase without ever asking whether they still mean what we think they mean. And just become a millionaire might be the most outdated one of them all. Hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up so the algorithm shows you the next one. Because the number you're aiming for might be the single most important number in your life, and I want to make sure you're aiming at the right one. Now, before we get into the new math, you need to understand where the $1 million dream even came from. Because it wasn't always a myth. Rewind to the 1980s and 90s. Back then, being a millionaire genuinely meant you were rich. $1 million could buy several nice homes outright. Interest rates on safe savings were high, sometimes 8, even 10%. You could park $1 million in the bank and live comfortably on the interest alone without ever touching the original pile. That is where the dream was born. Millionaire became cultural shorthand for set for life. It got baked into the movies, the songs, the game shows, and our parents' advice. But here's what happened next. The words stayed frozen in time. The math did not. Decades of quiet inflation hollowed the number out from the inside. So that's the setup. Now, let's look at what $1 million actually buys you in 2026. Number 1. The income reality. What $1 million actually pays you. Here's why it matters. People picture $1 million as a giant pile of spending money. It is not. If you want it to last, you can't spend the pile. You can only spend what it safely generates each year. Here's the dollar reality. The classic guideline is the 4% rule. You withdraw 4% of your savings in the first year, adjust it for inflation after that, and your money should last around 30 years. On $1 million, 4% is $40,000 a year. About $3,300 a month. Even the most optimistic newer research caps it around $47,000. The more cautious estimates land closer to $39,000. The consequence, the $1 million retirement is not a life of luxury. It is an income just below the typical American salary, except now you're not working, and it has to last you the rest of your life. And that's assuming the $40,000 even holds its value. It won't. Number 2. The inflation time bomb. Your million is shrinking while you sleep. Here's why it matters. Inflation isn't just a headline you scroll past. It's a silent tax on every single dollar you've saved, and it never, ever stops. Here's the dollar reality, and this one should stop you cold. $1 million today buys roughly what $600,000 bought back in 2010. In just over a decade, the million quietly lost almost 40% of its power. And it keeps going. At a normal 3% inflation rate, your $40,000 of spending power gets cut roughly in half over a 30-year retirement. By your 80s, that $40,000 feels more like 20. The consequence? Even if your million lasts on paper, the life it pays for keeps shrinking underneath you. Same number on the statement, half the groceries, half the trips, half the freedom. And while your money is quietly shrinking, the things you need most are getting more expensive, faster. Number 3. The longevity and healthcare squeeze. Here's why it matters. 2 huge things have changed since the $1 million dream was born. We live far longer now, and the single biggest expense of old age is rising faster than almost everything else. Here's the dollar reality. Retire at 65 today, and you might easily live to 90, 95, even 100. That's 30 or more years your money has to survive. And healthcare costs have been climbing 5 to 7% a year, far faster than regular inflation. A single retiree can expect well into six figures in medical costs alone across retirement, stacked on top of everything else. The consequence: the million gets attacked from two sides at once. It has to stretch over more years than ever before, while its biggest expense grows faster than ever before. People quietly plan for a 15-year retirement and then get handed a 30-year one with a budget that runs dry halfway through. Which brings us to the gap that almost nobody talks about. The gap between what a million gives you and what people actually want. Number 4. The lifestyle gap. What people expect versus what a million delivers. Here's why it matters. When people picture retirement, they don't picture scraping by. They picture freedom, travel, long mornings, time with the grandkids, maybe a second home, or just never flinching at a price tag in the grocery store again. Here's the dollar reality. In surveys, Americans in their late 50s to 70s say they'd need around $135,000 a year to retire comfortably. To safely generate that from your savings at 4%, you would need about $3.4 million. But $1 million generates $40,000. The dream costs $135,000. That is not a small gap. That is a different universe. And in expensive states, $1 million can run completely dry in barely a decade. The consequence: this is exactly why so many new millionaires still feel quietly anxious about money. They hit the magic number and then discovered the magic was already gone. They spent decades aiming at a target that had moved 50 years earlier. So if $1 million isn't the number anymore, what is, and how do you actually hit it? Number 5. The new number and how to actually reach it. Here's why it matters. And here's the good news, because there finally is some. The moment you stop chasing a myth and start chasing the real number, the path forward gets surprisingly clear. Here's the dollar reality. For a comfortable, inflation-protected retirement today, most people should be aiming somewhere between $1.5 and $2.5 million, depending on where they live and how they want to live. $2 million is a reasonable, honest, modern target. It throws off around $80,000 a year, a genuine middle-class retirement. And here's the part that changes everything. To reach $2 million by 65, starting at age 30, you need to invest about $870 a month. Start at 25, and it drops to under $600. The consequence: that right there is the entire difference between panic and peace. It is not winning the lottery. It is not landing some enormous salary. It's aiming at the right number early and then letting time do the heavy lifting for you. Miss it, and you spend your 60s terrified. Hit it, and you spend them free. And that points to the real lesson hiding underneath all of this. Let me zoom out for a second. Because the $1 million myth is really about something much deeper than a number. Here's the truth. $1 million was never actually magic. It was a snapshot. A photograph of what wealth looked like at one specific moment in history, decades ago. And we framed that photo and kept chasing it, long after the world inside the picture had completely disappeared. The wealthy do not think in round numbers. They don't chase a trophy figure to brag about at parties. They think in income, in cash flow, in one simple question. How much can this throw off every year, forever, without me ever touching the core? They build machines that pay them, and then they protect those machines from inflation with assets that actually grow. A round number is a goal you hit exactly once. An income machine pays you for the rest of your life. And here's the math that proves the entire mindset. That $870 a month we just talked about over 35 years at 8%, it quietly becomes $2 million. That very same amount, started just 15 years later, barely cracks $400,000. Same effort, same monthly habit, a wildly different life. The difference was never the income. It was time and aiming at the right target early enough to use it. And that is the real gap between the wealthy and everyone else. It was never only about earning more. It's about knowing exactly what to aim for and starting before everyone else realizes the target quietly moved. The information gap, one more time, is the wealth gap. And the $1 million myth might just be the single most expensive piece of outdated information in America. Let me paint you a picture of what getting this right actually feels like. It feels like checking your accounts in your 40s and realizing you're no longer chasing a number you saw on a bumper sticker. You're building an income that will outlive you. It feels like watching a news story about inflation, and instead of a knot of fear, feeling strangely prepared because your whole plan was built to beat it, not to ignore it. It feels like sitting across from a friend who just hit their million and feels weirdly empty, and quietly understanding exactly why, because you aimed higher on purpose. It feels like reaching your 60s, running the real numbers, and seeing that you can actually stop. Not stop and stress. Just stop. It feels like the freedom to say yes. To the trip. To the grandkids. To the extra years. Without a spreadsheet flinching every single time. And that feeling, the quiet feeling of having aimed at the right target while everyone around you chased the wrong one, is worth far more than the bragging rights of a round number ever could be. So, there you have it. The real truth about the $1 million myth in 2026. 1. $1 million only pays you about $40,000 a year, below the average paycheck. 2. Inflation has already gutted it, and it will cut its power roughly in half again across your retirement. 3. You will live longer, and healthcare will rise faster, attacking it from both sides at once. 4. The comfortable retirement people actually want costs closer to $3 million, not 1. 5. Aim for $1.5 to $2 million. Start as early as you possibly can and automate the climb. So here is what I want you to do today. Stop chasing a number from a world that no longer exists. Forget the bumper sticker million. Find your real number, the one that throws off the income you actually want, and start quietly building the machine that pays it. The finish line moved. But the path is still wide open, and it still rewards the people who start first. So don't aim at yesterday's target. Aim at the life you actually want. I'll see you in the next one.